I didn't mean to press play. It was 2 a.m, the kind of hour that makes you feel disloyal to your own heartbeat. I was at my kitchen table with a mug of peppermint tea I never touched. I had propped my iPad against the glass sugar jar, opened the little nursery cam app, and told myself I would only check the sound levels, just see how the new baby monitor handled low light, make sure the angle was right. But then I pressed play on last night's recording, and my world stood still. The first image was ordinary, the pale glow of a nightlight shaped like a sleepy star, a toddler bed with a navy comforter covered in tiny rockets, a bookshelf with board books lined up like little teeth. In the upper left corner, the timestamp read 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 8 seconds. Lucas was sitting up. My grandson, 3 years old, soft hair the color of wheat, cheeks still round with babyhood, rocked in place, clutching a stuffed otter to his chest. He was whispering to it. I raised the volume. "Be good," he told the otter. "Be small. Be quiet." I might have smiled if the words hadn't felt like a bruise. The bedroom door opened a crack. Light slid in, and with it my daughter-in-law's voice, sweet and tight, like artificial vanilla with a bitter note only a child and a grandmother can hear. "Still awake?" Sophie asked. The door opened wider. My son's voice drifted past from the hallway, thinner than I remembered. "Soph, it's late. Let him settle." "I am," she answered without looking back. "Mommy's just checking." She walked into the frame and stood a foot from the bed. The nightlight haloed her in blue. I saw her hand reach down, saw Lucas stiffen. "Eyes closed, Lucas." A beat. "You don't need all that fuss. Eyes closed, or Mommy will be upset." He flinched. Obedient, he pressed his lids shut so hard his eyelashes trembled. He tried to be the smallest thing in the room. "Stop breathing like that," Sophie said. "It's too loud." Tea lapped the rim of my mug and burned across my knuckles. I barely felt it. I'm 68, retired after 40 years of teaching first grade in Salem, Oregon. I once joked that I could hear a child's lie through 2 walls and a thunderstorm. There are talents that never stop being curses. On the video, I heard the lie behind Sophie's soft voice. I heard the fatigue in Ethan's voice from the hallway. I heard, most of all, the silence a child makes when he learns he's safest as an echo. When Sophie left, when the door clicked shut, when Lucas finally exhaled in a tiny, apologetic stream, something in my chest ached that felt older than me and younger than prayer. I watched 6 nights in a row. I told myself to stop. I kept watching. Every night left the same wet footprint of dread. The visits were brief and surgical. Adjust the blanket, reposition the pillow, insist on stillness, chide a breath, correct a whisper. Not once a scream, not once a slap. Sophie didn't need noise to be cruel. Her power was the promise of it. On the 7th night, it changed. The door flew open at 2:03 a.m. Light struck the room like a thrown plate. Sophie came in fast enough to jiggle the camera. Her voice cut the air like a paper edge. "You're doing it on purpose," she said. "Why are you doing this to me?" Lucas tried to disappear into the mattress. He held the otter up like a shield and didn't cry, not out loud. "Don't make that ugly face." She yanked the otter away. "No toys. Toys are only for boys who sleep." "Please," Lucas whispered. It sounded like a moth pressed under glass. "Say sorry. Say it like you mean it. I'm sorry. That's not your real voice. That's baby voice. You're not a baby." He was 3. "Again," she said. "I'm sorry." He choked, louder. "I'm sorry. Now breathe quietly." He inhaled in a small, shaky sip. I saw every instinct in him argue with itself. Breathe to stay alive. Don't breathe to keep her from being angry. And then I did something I promised myself I would never do again after retirement. I pulled an index card from the drawer where I keep rubber bands and warranty cards and wrote a name in my old teacher script. "Sophie," I wrote. Next to it, "Make it stop." In the morning, I drove to Ethan and Sophie's house with banana bread. I'm the sort of mother who shows up with warm food and a practical solution. People underestimate the sharpness hidden in that kind of kindness. It's not that I like wars. I like winning them quickly. Ethan opened the door. He looked as if his life were a candle set too close to the furnace, the shape the same, the edges softened by heat. "Hey, Mom," he said, tugging at the sleep shirt hanging on his thin frame. "It's early." Banana bread waits for no man, I said. He stepped aside, embarrassed and grateful, and I pulled him into a hug because I still could. His ribs surprised my arms. He had always been a gentle boy. I worried he would confuse gentleness with permission when he fell in love. I had worried correctly. "Where's my favorite astronaut?" I asked, stepping over a scatter of tiny wooden rockets. "Kitchen," Ethan said, rubbing the back of his neck. He's slow to warm. Lucas sat in a booster at the counter. His hair looked thinner. The skin under his eyes looked older. He had the otter tucked under one arm like a friend you're told you shouldn't need. When he saw me, his face did what children's faces do when relief arrives. He didn't smile. He melted a fraction. "There's my moon," I said lightly, because first grader rules still apply to 3-year-olds. Don't rush the hug. Let them come to you. I brought bread. Bread is not breakfast because I'm a terrible influence, but it still goes on the plate because I'm a grandmother. "Gamma," he said, and the word stung my throat. Sophie came in crisp as a dollar bill, a spotless workout set, a sheen of effortlessness that made you suspect it was a costume. "Margaret," she said, using my name like something she might need to return later. "We weren't expecting you." "That's why it's a surprise," I said, smiling. "Surprises are for birthdays." "Banana bread is for Tuesdays," I said, setting the loaf down, "and for boys who are growing galaxies." Sophie's smile stayed stuck to her face like a decal. "Lucas, honey," she said, "what do we say?" "Thank you," Lucas whispered to the countertop. I sliced bread, buttered, poured coffee, poured milk, wrestled a jam lid until it popped like a tiny celebration. The domestic choreography soothed my hands, even as my mind replayed last night's video frame by frame like a courtroom exhibit. "Rough night?" I asked conversationally. "He's in a phase," Sophie said. "What kind?" "Testing." "Ah," I said. "Gravity does that too. We keep it anyway." She gave a little breath that wasn't a laugh. "We're following our pediatrician's recommendations. Sleep training, clear boundaries. He needs consistency." "And love," I said gently. "And love," she echoed, as if it were an optional garnish. Ethan's gaze dropped to the coffee. "It's just been a lot," he said. "Work's intense. Soph's had less help from her mother lately. We're making it." I sat across from Lucas and leaned my elbows into the table the way mothers aren't supposed to. "Lucas," I said softly, letting my voice pass under the wire strung through his chest. "How's school?" He stroked the otter's ear with his thumb. "We glued," he said, "and I couldn't make my stick man stand." "That's because stickmen are unreliable, darling. Next time we'll give him a belly." "Margaret," Sophie said, pleasant voice, precise edges, "we don't use darling. We read an article that said affectionate labels blur boundaries." I smiled at her the way you smile at a person who thinks a new word will fix an old problem. "I read an article once that said sugar is a vegetable. I didn't believe it either." "Mom," Ethan warned reflexively. "I'm joking," I said, "mostly." When Sophie headed to Pilates and Ethan retreated to a Zoom meeting I suspected was mostly a man holding his forehead and nodding, I took Lucas for a walk. The rain held its breath. The sky considered its options. We counted mailboxes like stars. "Does your tummy ever hurt at night?" I asked once we were 2 blocks away. "Yes." "Before bed or after?" "Before, when the door clicks." "And is mommy nice at bedtime?" He thought about it, because children like him must build a small courthouse in their minds before answering. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "but sometimes I am too loud." "Too loud breathing?" He looked up at me with eyes that had learned how to check the weather of a face. "Gamma," he whispered. "If you breathe quiet, you can be invisible." I took his small, cold hand and held it like a delicate animal that needed to believe in the shape of safety. "I can see you," I said. He looked frightened and then relieved. Both were correct. That evening I asked Ethan if I could sleep on their couch. "I'll be gone in the morning," I said, "in case he wakes early and Sophie wants to sleep in." Ethan hesitated. Sophie's mouth tightened a degree. "We have it handled," she said. "Routine is crucial." "I agree," I said. "Routines like breakfast and bedtime and not making boys feel like ghosts." For a moment the decal slipped. "I know you think you know everything about children," she said, "but this is our house." "It is," I said, "and he is my grandson. Your grandson is fine." You told him not to breathe loudly. We don't discuss private parenting choices in front of the child. We aren't in front of the child, I said. Ethan glanced toward the hallway as if fatherhood waited there, asking to be let in. Mom, he said softly, please don't start. I didn't answer. Sometimes the fuse you light is the sentence you don't say. I went home and didn't sleep. At dawn, I brewed coffee and watched 2 more nights. At 1:56 a.m., Sophie took the otter and set it on the bookshelf out of reach. At 2:09, Lucas tried not to cry and lost. At 2:11, Sophie stood in the doorway and said, if you keep making that face, it will stay that way forever, and nobody will like you. At 2:12, I paused the feed, closed my eyes, and saw my first classroom, the warped windows, the paste smell, and the face of a 6-year-old girl who once told me, in first-grade handwriting, I am a bad noise. It took a month to teach her to sing her name. It was the best lesson I ever taught. I picked up my phone and called a name I hadn't dialed in years. Elias, I said when the line connected. It's Margaret Church. Do you still do family law? Margaret, he said. I do. Why? Because my grandson is learning how to disappear, and I won't let him. Are you safe? For the moment, I said, but I don't plan to remain polite. Elias's suit jackets still smell faintly of sawdust. He grew up in a carpentry shop and never fell out of love with the idea that things can be built square if you measure twice and cut once. I gave him what I had. He told me to bring the videos. Don't text them, he said. Bring them. I brought a thumb drive to his office, along with a warm loaf because banana bread has its ways. He watched without blinking, the tendons in his jaw working as if he were chewing something bitter. When the last clip ended, he exhaled like he'd been underwater. Technically, he said, you have a strong case for emotional abuse. Is there any other kind? I asked. Yes, he said, but sometimes the soft kind leaves the deepest marks. What do I do? Document everything. Dates, times, witnesses. Keep your voice off the videos. Don't confront her on camera. Don't threaten to call the police. She'll rehearse for that performance. And Margaret, he hesitated, don't take the boy without a plan. I'm a retired school teacher, I said. Trust that I know how to make a plan. Plans don't stop handcuffs. Handcuffs don't stop grandmothers, I said. And he gave me a look I've seen on men who realize they've underestimated a quiet woman. 2 days later, I asked to babysit. Sophie agreed because Pilates feeds Instagram best at 11. Ethan texted a thumbs up and a heart. I drove over with a tote bag containing 3 picture books, a new otter with a red scarf, a thermos of chicken noodle soup, wipe-off crayons, and a printed list of pediatric trauma therapists. I left the list in my glove box. You learn when to show your cards and when to make origami with them. At 12:40, after I'd made chicken noodle soup into a puppet show and convinced Lucas that otters wear napkin hats on special occasions, I heard the front door close. Sophie's recorded laugh went down the hall like a scent. The house exhaled. Lucas, I said quietly, do you want to go on an adventure? His eyes flickered with something small and fierce. Yes. We have to ask Otter. Otter needs consent. Otter says yes. Then let's go. I buckled him into my car seat. I'm the kind of grandmother who checks buckles twice. I placed the original Otter in his lap and the new one on mine so we'd all be traveling as equals. As I backed out of the driveway, my phone rang. Ethan's name flashed. My thumb hovered, then with an apology he couldn't hear, I silenced the call. Before I turned onto Lancaster, I called Elias. I'm taking him somewhere safe, I said. We'll present to CPS by noon. Then document the time and keep driving, he said. We drove an hour east into the green that refuses to apologize for being everywhere in Oregon. My cabin is a rectangle of wood and quiet near the Santiam River, a place my husband built when he still loved Saturdays more than deadlines, and the sound of rain on a tin roof more than the ping of email. He's been gone 6 years, heart attack at dawn that made the clouds look like they were knocking. But the cabin remembers him the good way. It remembers laughter. It remembers a porch light that means welcome and not interrogation. Lucas fell asleep so hard his mouth turned soft at the corners. When he woke, the river was talking to the rocks like old friends, and 2 jays argued over a pine cone. He blinked at the world as if it had been repainted during his nap, and the painter knew his favorite color. Gamma? He asked. Is this your forest? It's everybody's, I said. But today, we get to borrow it. Inside, I made grilled cheese with the crusts cut off because some wars you avoid. I ran a lavender bath because water is an apology we can pour. I put him in a clean t-shirt that said, "Brave like Grandma," because perhaps I am dramatic, and perhaps that's what saves us. We napped in the old double bed under the quilt my mother pieced while my father coughed in the next room and refused to see a doctor because the men in my family were suspicious of help. When we woke, the light had shifted and the world smelled like pine. "Do I live here now?" Lucas asked. "You live where you are safe," I said. "Right now, that's here." He considered it, nodded, and resumed launching Otter off a pillow like a stuntman who'd negotiated hazard pay. At dusk, my phone found a bar of service and did what phones do. It scolded me with missed calls and texts. "Ethan." "Mom, where are you?" "Sophie." "This is kidnapping." Ethan again. "Please answer, please." "Sophie." "I'm calling the police." "Unknown. This is Officer Forrester. Please call me." "Elias." "Do not answer police without me." I looked at the screen until the words blurred. Then I turned the phone off and listened to the river until my breathing matched it. In the morning, Elias met us with raspberries and a folder that smelled faintly of toner and inevitability. He knelt so he and Lucas were the same height. "Hi, Lucas," he said. "I'm Elias. I like otters." Lucas studied him with the seriousness of a small judge. "I also like raspberries," Elias added, holding up the carton. "Me too," Lucas said, and granted provisional acceptance. While Lucas curated a treaty between the Jays and Otter on the porch, Elias sat at my little table and opened his folder. "Sophie and Ethan called the police," he said. "Officer is smart. He wants calm. I advised you'll be in town by noon to meet with CPS, with me present." "You advised," I said. "I advised," he said again. "You are not under arrest, yet." "I won't be." I set a typed page on the table, dates, times, 1 line per incident. I have documentation, 6 videos, the pediatrician's card, a trauma therapist appointment for Monday. "Good," he said. "Keep being you." At 11:30, I buckled Lucas in and drove back to Salem. We parked in front of the station because sometimes the bravest house you can walk into is the one you fear. Officer Forrester met us in the lobby with a look that flickered between policeman and father and settled somewhere human. "Miss Church," he said, shaking my hand, "we appreciate you coming in voluntarily." "I'm here for him," I said, because that sentence can wrap armor around a morning. Sophie and Ethan arrived from the other direction. Sophie's hair was perfect. Her eyes were not. Ethan looked like the word repent written without confidence. Sophie stopped 3 feet away and folded her anger into a shape that would fit through a door. "You had no right," she said. "You had no right," I replied softly, "to make him afraid of breathing." "Margaret, please," Ethan said. His voice cracked. Officer Forrester guided us into a small room where the coffee tasted like someone had lost a bet and brewed it with burnt. I told her what I'd seen. I handed over the thumb drive. Elias slid his card and said documentation like a steady drumbeat behind the hour. Danielle nodded and asked Stitches, small questions that held something raw together. When it was Sophie's turn, her mouth trembled. For a brief, unguarded second, I saw a child, the kind who had been taught that love is carefulness, and carefulness means people not causing you work. Then the door shut behind her eyes. "I love my son," she said. "I would never hurt him. He's difficult. He refuses to sleep. Sleep is crucial for brain development. My pediatrician said structure. If I sound strict on those videos, it's because I was exhausted and doing my best." "Did you tell him not to breathe loudly?" Danielle asked. "I told him to breathe quietly to soothe himself. Did you say, 'Don't make that ugly face'?" I said his frowning wasn't helpful. "Did you tell him he's not a baby?" "He's not." "Did you take away his comfort object?" "Yes, to break the habit. The book said—" "The book," Danielle said, "didn't see your child's face at 2 a.m. Sophie's hand went flat on the table as if she might push it away. "You're twisting everything." "I'm asking," Danielle said. Truth doesn't need to raise its voice. Ethan stared at his coffee as if absolution floated there. "I didn't know what to do," he said finally. "Work was killing me. Sophie was drowning. I thought this was what parenting looks like when you're tired and trying. I didn't know it was wrong until my mother made me watch the videos." Sophie turned sharply toward him. You watch them? He nodded, a man carrying earned guilt. She made me. Danielle closed her folder. For now, she said, Lucas will remain temporarily with Miss Church while we complete an emergency evaluation. There will be supervised visitation. We'll schedule a hearing. Therapy for Lucas is non-negotiable. Therapy for both of you is strongly recommended. Recommended? Sophie repeated, disbelief hollowing the word. We don't need therapy. We need our son. You need both, Danielle said. One allows the other. In the parking lot, Ethan approached while Sophie was on the phone, slicing the air into unfavorable fractions. I'm sorry, he said. It sounded like his first unbroken apology. I should have heard the first time. You didn't because you liked believing love was enough, I said. It isn't. It's the start. It's not the finish. Will he hate me? He'll forgive you if you give him reasons to, I said. Start today. We drove home, the cabin that night, my house the next week while I made spaces softer than they'd been. I bought a nightlight shaped like the moon. I hung a string of paper stars above a little bed I moved into my guest room. I made a ritual of bedtime, which is to say I made worship of it. Bath, pajamas, 2 books, 1 song, a whisper, a 5 count for breathing. On the 3rd night, when I tucked the blanket and kissed his forehead, Lucas whispered, Can I keep breathing when the door closes? And I said, yes, and stood in the doorway with the door open a hand's width, so the answer stayed true. He started seeing Dr. Veronica Herrera, a child psychologist with a wilting plant, a basket of plastic animals, and a sense of humor. On the 2nd session, Lucas put the otter in the toy crib and then took it out again, 20 times, narrating a story without using the word scared. Sometimes otters are scared of the dark, Dr. Herrera said, and he cried for the first time in front of a person who didn't tell him to stop. What does he need? I asked, after the 3rd session in the voice you use when you're praying but don't want to scare anyone. Predictability, permission to feel, and a correction to the story in his head that says my body is wrong when it asks for comfort, she said. He needs adults who can stay calm when he believes he's in trouble. I can do calm. I know, she said, and if life is kind, it gives you people who believe you before the proof arrives. Ethan began showing up twice a week for supervised visits. He came early, nervous, with too many snacks and the wrong sticker book. He sat cross-legged on the rug and built towers that survived small earthquakes. He apologized without asking for credit. He learned to say no without raising his voice. Twice he cried in the bathroom with the faucet running, and when he came out, something in him had decided to grow instead of collapse. Sophie didn't come to the first 2 visits. On the 3rd, she knocked like a cop and walked in like the law, thinner, sharper. But her eyes weren't what I expected. I had prepared for arrogance. What I saw looked like grief that didn't know how to become soft. She wore it like armor and like a wound. Lucas, she said. She stopped 2 feet away as if an invisible line marked the edge of her permission. Sweetheart. He looked up from his blocks, hands still moving as if motion loosened memory. Hi, he said, polite as to a stranger. I'm sorry, she said. The words shocked her, as if her mouth had never formed them without a fight. I've been seeing a therapist. She says I learned love from people who handed it out like chores. I thought control was protection. I thought I was failing if you cried. Lucas put a block on another block. Are you angry now? No, she said, and it seemed to surprise her. I'm scared of how much I didn't know. He handed her a block. You can put it here. She placed it, a woman being taught by a child how to be better at the correct speed. After she left, I stood at the sink and watched the backyard turn the kind of gold that makes sadness sit down and wait its turn. I didn't trust her yet. But I had seen something timing can't fake. A hearing was set 3 weeks out. Between then and the dates circled on the calendar like a planet we were aiming for, life lived in the present tense. I set an extra place for the idea of peace. Sometimes it came, sometimes it didn't. Dr. Herrera taught Lucas to name feelings like animals. This is fear, small and quick. This is sadness, heavy and slow. This is anger, sharp with teeth. He started sleeping through the night. When he woke, he didn't check my face for weather. He climbed into my bed and demanded pancakes, which is how all gods should be worshipped, with butter. The night before the hearing, Ethan stood on my porch gripping the railing as if gravity had recently become optional. "I signed up for a 12-week parenting class," he said. "I'm on week 5. I'm learning I let my fear of conflict be bigger than my love." "That's a good sentence," I said. "Keep it." "Do you think Sophie can change? Human beings aren't finished unless they decide they are. And if she doesn't? Then your job is not to let your son pay the bill for her choices." Courtrooms aren't designed to hold the quantity of feeling they invite. The judge's robe looked like it had been ironed by someone who does hard things early out of kindness. We sat where we were told, Elias at my side like a fact, Sophie and Ethan with their attorney holding hands like a raft. Danielle testified first, precise, unflinching. She described the videos, the assessment, the interim plan. She didn't overreach. She didn't need to. Dr. Herrera testified next. She used words that fit both science and lullabies: regulation, attachment, repair. "He is improving," she said, "in an environment that communicates safety with both word and body. Returning him too quickly to an environment that previously dysregulated him would risk regression." Sophie's attorney presented therapy records, letters from her counselor, proof of a parenting course in progress, a note from the pediatrician that used misapplied in a paragraph about boundary setting and blankets. Ethan spoke. He didn't make excuses. He described the way men in our family held their breath until crises passed and how dangerously that translated into parenting. He cried. He didn't perform it. He was a man who wished time would return 1 month. When it was my turn, I said only what was necessary. "I'm a grandmother," I said, "and a retired teacher. I've held a lot of children who thought they were too much. I know how to make a home with rules that are soft at the edges so they don't cut you when you bump into them at night. I want my grandson to keep his breath." The judge removed his glasses and said, "The child's safety and well-being are paramount. Temporary custody remains with Miss Church for 6 months. Supervised visits twice weekly for both parents, with the option to move to unsupervised for the father at Dr. Herrera's recommendation after 8 weeks. The mother's visits remain supervised until both Dr. Herrera and the mother's counselor agree she has integrated non-coercive strategies. All parties will return in 12 weeks. Any incident of verbal humiliation or punitive withholding of comfort will suspend visitation." Sophie inhaled as if the air had teeth. Ethan nodded like a man practicing at home. On the steps, Sophie asked to speak to me. Elias watched like a lifeguard when the current looks interesting. She stopped at a sane distance. "I hated you," she said. The honesty made her look dangerously young. "I still hate you some days." "I understand. But when he handed me a block and told me to add to the tower, I realized he still thinks I can build something." "You can," I said. "You just can't rush it." "What if I fail him again?" Her voice cracked on him. "Then you repair, and you apologize, and you let better adults step in while you learn," I said. "You don't hide your work." She laughed, a tiny sound like a hinge remembering it can move. "You really are a teacher." "I am," I said, "and you really could be a mother he likes." The months that followed were ordinary in the way survivors know is holy. Breakfasts and laundry, therapy appointments and sticker charts that celebrated feelings named without shame. Walks by the river where Lucas gave lectures to an especially opinionated Jay. Visits with Ethan where I pretended not to notice him studying my voice like a map. Visits with Sophie that began in bright rooms with supervisors and slowly, painfully, started to look less like people taking a test and more like people learning. Badly. Then better. She stopped insisting he be small. She started asking him to come close. She learned to apologize in a sentence without a paragraph of self-pity. The first time he fell asleep with his head in her lap during a visit, I wasn't in the room, but something inside me unclenched anyway. We returned to court at 12 weeks. Dr. Herrera testified that Lucas slept soundly 5 nights in 7, no longer flinched at doors, and interrupted grown-up sentences with long stories about a river otter who sometimes needed help with pajamas, but always managed in the end. Danielle testified that Sophie complied with every requirement, that her counselor reported progress in catching coercive impulses at the lip of the mouth, that when she failed, and she had twice, she repaired quickly and precisely, asking Lucas what he needed to feel safer and telling him in words he could understand, that her tone had been wrong. The judge allowed Ethan unsupervised Saturday mornings. He allowed Sophie an extra hour under supervision, with the possibility of easing if she maintained. Custody stayed with me, the next review in another 12 weeks. He was careful. I decided to like him. At home, I marked the schedule on a big paper calendar with a green pen because green feels like choices turning toward life. Lucas drew a tiny otter in the square for Saturday mornings and wrote, in letters only a grandmother can read, Dada. The first Saturday Ethan took him to the park alone, they returned with a scraped knee and the right kind of proud. Ethan knocked with a box of muffins he pretended he'd baked and eyes that were red and beautiful. He asked me if breathing loud is okay outside, he said. I told him yes. He tested it. He breathed like a dragon for a whole minute. People stared. I let them. You're learning, I said. I am, he said. I saw him at 6 for a moment, standing with a popsicle, watching ants learn to swim. Sophie's progress was slower, more like a tide we measured with marks on a rock. She learned to sit on her hands when she wanted to adjust his face. She learned to ask before taking the otter. She learned to tolerate the noise of a boy alive. Twice she called late, wrecked and honest. I said the wrong words again, she confessed. I corrected it. He forgave me. Will I ever stop being this person? If you keep practicing, I said. Humility is a muscle. So is gentleness. Did anyone teach you this? She asked once. 40 years of first graders, I said. And a husband who left me stories better than explanations. At 6 months, the judge extended shared custody with a transition plan that would make a less careful family impatient and made ours grateful. Lucas would spend 2 weeknights with Ethan in a gentle 1-bedroom 10 minutes from me. He'd have 2 afternoons with Sophie under supervision that would lighten to a check-in if she kept her therapy, and Dr. Herrera signed off. The rest with me until the next review. This is not punishment, the judge said to Sophie, and for the first time she nodded as if the world might not intend to break her. This is pacing. Summer remembered how to be kind and kept the promise for a week. Lucas climbed onto the porch swing with Otter and announced, I am not invisible anymore. No, I said, swallowing a sob to save it for later. You are gloriously here. He leaned against my shoulder, hot and damp. Can we breathe loud? We can breathe however we want, I said. We did, 2 dragons with jam on our cheeks. I opened the monitor months later, not because I was afraid, but because Lucas asked to see the Star Night camera, and I wanted to give him back the room without the ghost in it. We watched a clip together, him under the moon nightlight in my house, whispering to Otter, we can breathe. He giggled at the sound of his own voice. I used to be scared, he said. It sounded like someone describing weather. You were, I said, and you were brave inside it. Mommy says sorry a lot, he said. Sometimes she says it before she does the thing. That's practicing, I said. Daddy laughs more, he added. He makes pancakes wrong and then fixes them. So do I said. And he considered me with the generosity small children extend to people who feed them. At the next review, the judge increased Ethan's time. Sophie's remained supervised, with the option to shift 1 hour if she held steady another 6 weeks. She didn't argue. She nodded like a person learning the quiet grace of not insisting. On the steps, she asked if she could take Lucas and her sister to the botanical garden Sunday. We'll breathe loud at the roses, she said. Okay, I said, and watched her take the long way toward being the mother she should have had. Life, being what it is, did not move along on a clean, upward line. There was a Thursday in October when Sophie called from the curb, voice tight as piano wire. He screamed in the car seat because the buckle pinched, and I said, use your normal voice, and now he won't talk. Bring him inside, I said. You'll apologize without a speech. Then you'll help me bake a pie. She came in with swollen eyes and a forced smile that dropped as soon as the door snicked shut. I'm sorry, she told him. My voice was wrong. Your voice can be any size. He studied her with the kind of seriousness that makes adults wish we had lived better. Any size? He asked. Any size, she said. Even dragon? Especially dragon. We baked. Lucas pushed the pastry cutter like it owed him money. Sophie peeled apples in careful spirals and, between slices, told him about a time she cried at school because her mother forgot pickup, and a teacher told her tears were leaky bravery. He handed her the cinnamon with a solemnity usually reserved for oaths. When she left, she hugged me and whispered, "I hate how much I needed to be told how to talk to a person I love." "You were told how to talk to a person who scared you," I said. "You're learning different." There was also the Saturday Ethan returned Lucas late, face flushed, eyes bright. They had raced sticks under the footbridge and then gotten hot chocolate. "We spilled," Ethan said, showing me the map of cocoa on his sleeve as if it were proof of having tried. He said sorry before I could, and then he said I didn't have to be perfect for him to love me. Where do they learn that? "If they're lucky," I said, "from us when we mean it." On the anniversary of the night I pressed play, we drove to the river. We brought the nightlight shaped like a moon, the first threadbare otter whose seams showed where he'd held too much, and a paper boat Ethan helped Lucas fold, lopsided and perfect. We stood on the bank and made a ceremony of something small and huge. "What are we doing?" Lucas asked, excited by the idea that grown-ups allow magic. "We're giving the bad nights back to the river," I said. He set the paper boat on the water. It wobbled, decided to be brave, and floated. Otter watched from the shore like a satisfied lifeguard. We breathed, ridiculously loud, like dragons who don't need to frighten anyone to prove they exist. After, we got ice cream to celebrate the day we kept breathing. Vanilla for him, coffee for me. Ethan took a picture of us clinking cones and sent it to Sophie with a caption, "Breathing Club." She replied with a heart, then a dragon, then the moon. Progress, measured in emojis and Saturdays. There were courtrooms after that, and calendars and Tuesdays that looked like ordinary life. The judge moved like a careful metronome, tick toward reunification, talk toward safety. Ethan completed his class and started quoting phrases like, "Name it to tame it," without irony. He learned to kneel before he corrected. He learned to say, "I'm here," and mean, "I am here for the next 10 minutes, even if they are hard." Sophie did therapy like a person who finally believes the work might be worth the ache. She learned to text me, "I feel the urge to tidy him," and accept when I replied, "Let him spill." One evening, after a supervised park visit that had looked more like an ordinary afternoon than a monitored exam, Sophie sat on my porch steps while Lucas ran circles with Otter airborne like a flag. "My therapist says I used to think love was a project I managed," she said. "Now I'm trying to think of it as a climate I protect. I don't know how to be weather." "Start by not being a storm," I said. "I like your metaphors better than hers." "Mine come with pie," I said. "That helps." Lucas tripped and went down hard, the sudden silence before the cry old and familiar. Sophie and I both stood. She stopped herself 2 steps in, hands half raised, and waited while he decided what the moment needed. He looked at his palms, saw the gravel, looked at us, saw the faces he has learned to check, and chose a cry that asked to be held and not managed. Sophie crossed the last steps like a person who has been practicing this walk. "That hurt," she said. "Come here." No lesson, no lecture, just arms. He melted into her lap and sobbed, then hiccuped, then breathed, loud as a dragon on purpose. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay. It would be pretty if stories ended where the light is good. They usually don't." There was a winter cold snap where the pipes complained and every errand took twice as long. There was a stomach bug that traveled the family like a rude salesman. In that tiredness, Sophie's old voice visited once, sharp and precise. "Quiet tears, Lucas." He froze. She caught herself, and before I could, she went to him on her knees. "I'm sorry," she said, without a paragraph of reasons. "My mouth forgot. I will keep practicing. Your tears are allowed." He put his hand on her cheek. "Allowed," he said, like an expert granting a license. Spring came like a polite knock. We had a final hearing in May, final in the way anything involving humans is ever final. The judge looked older or kinder. It's hard to tell with people who carry the weight of other people's days. He listened. He asked Dr. Herrera how she knew the child felt safe. "He laughs with his belly," she said. "He tells the truth about small things. He argues with confidence. He dreams out loud." Ethan spoke about the part of him that wants to avoid conflict, how he now sets timers for hard conversations and lets them ring. Sophie said, "I used to think sorry was a surrender. I'm learning it's a tool." Danielle said, "Everyone here did the boring work. I like boring work." The judge granted joint legal custody with a gradual transition to shared physical custody over the next year, conditioned on continued therapy and compliance. He kept me in the order as a kin guardian with standing, which is a legal way of saying the court knows who keeps extra nightlights and spare pajamas. He told Lucas that grown-ups were going to keep doing their homework. Lucas asked if the judge liked otters. The judge said yes. Later that afternoon, we picnicked at the botanical garden. The roses behaved themselves. Sophie brought too much fruit. Ethan brought the wrong kind of hummus. Lucas wore a shirt with a dragon breathing stars. He took my hand and pulled me toward the pond, where a turtle considered the world with admirable slowness. "Gamma?" he asked. "Yes, Moon? When I grow big, I will tell my boy he can breathe." "When you grow big," I said, "he won't need reminding, but tell him anyway." Years will fold like laundry. There will be a first day of kindergarten with a backpack too large and a photo in front of a door that looks like an advertisement for clean starts. There will be a lost tooth grin, a reading of green eggs and ham loud enough to make the neighbor's dog bark, a scraped knee that hurts less than the insult of the scrape. A school play where a paper star falls off and Lucas doesn't notice because he is busy being a comet. There will be a little league game where he stands in the outfield and studies an ant for 8 minutes, then catches a ball he has no business catching and looks shocked that hands can learn hope. There will be parent-teacher nights where Sophie writes notes that say, "How do I support him when he shuts down?" and teachers who reply with lists worth saving. There will be Saturdays where Ethan burns pancakes and Lucas learns how to flip them without burning his wrists, and both of them cheer as if this were a sport the Olympics ought to consider. And there will be nights, still, when door clicks make a body remember. On those nights he will come to my house, even when he is 9, 12, 15, and pretending he only came for the pie. He will sleep in the guest room under the moon nightlight. He'll be embarrassed to ask for, and relieved when I turn on anyway. If he's lucky, and I intend for him to be, he will forget, then remember, then forget again that there was a year when breathing felt like a test. He will grow lungs that know they are allowed. Sometimes people ask me how we saved a boy from disappearing. They want a staircase with numbered steps. First you gather evidence, then you hire the right lawyer, then you call CPS, then you go to court, then you win. They want the view from the top and a guarantee about the weather. I tell them the truth. I didn't rescue him. I reminded him his body is allowed. I didn't teach him to be brave. I named what he already was. I didn't make justice. I made it show up. I pressed play, and then I did not look away. And then I insisted the adults be adults even when their childhoods argued with them like ghosts. Sometimes love requires you to get loud about simple things. Breathe, eat, sleep, apologize, repair. Sometimes courage is a grandmother at a table with a cooling mug of tea and a list of names to call. And sometimes the most radical act in a house that has taught a child to be small is to stand in the doorway at night and say, without raising your voice, "You may keep breathing," and then stay until the promise becomes the air. Tonight, if you came by my house at bedtime, you'd hear it plain as a hymn. A little boy breathing like a person who knows he belongs. A grandmother humming something old and unashamed, and, in the rooms beyond, in homes we are rebuilding at a pace the courts would approve, 2 parents practicing soft, practicing steady, practicing the kind of love that doesn't require anyone to disappear to be safe. We're not finished. We're breathing. We're together. And when the door clicks at night, it is only the door.